So this study is a follow-up in a group of 60-some patients with relapse refractory Waldenstrom's, Macroglobulinemia, who had a median of two previous treatments. 40% of them were in fact refractory to the last line of treatment. The median age was in the mid-60s. In terms of the IPSS Waldenstrom score, over half of them were either intermediate or high, and they were given Ibrutinib, the standard dose of 420 milligrams per day. So they had an excellent overall response rate of about 90%, including a very good PR rate of 27%. And if you look at their baseline versus best response in terms of IgM, they went from roughly 35 grams to 8 grams. The percentage of bone marrow infiltration went from 60 to 20%. And hemoglobin, which was roughly 10.5 at the beginning of treatment, was above 14 grams by the end. What was also interesting in this study is that patients with genotype for mutations of both MYD88 as well as CXCR4. Mutations of MYD88 are known to cause upregulation and signaling through the BTK and hematopoietic cell kinase, and therefore render cells more dependent on that signaling and perhaps more responsive to Ibrutinib. Whereas mutations of CXCR4 are associated with decreased effectiveness of Ibrutinib in vitro. And so when they looked at this, it broke down the patients in three groups. Those patients who were mutated for MYD88 but had wild-type CXCR4 versus those groups that had mutations of both genes. And lastly, versus those patients had no mutations, had wild type for both genes. The majority of patients, 50-some%, fell in the first group, and at the follow-up, nearly 4 years, median progression-free survival was not reached. In the group who had the double mutations, which is about a third of patients, the progression-free survival was in the order of 40-some months. Whereas in the group that had wild-type both mutations, the progression-free survival was roughly 20-some%. So in conclusion, this follow-up study shows really how effective Ibrutinib is in Waldenstrom's, and that the majority of patients have MYD88 mutations, do particularly well, I think the implications is that this is increasingly becoming the preferred line of treatment in relapsed refractory patients. Is very well tolerated. There were no new safety signals from previous experience with Ibrutinib and Waldenstrom. In fact, CLL, very comparable. This is a great confirmation that on longer follow-up that most patients continue to respond. Very acceptable safety profile. And I really think it solidifies the idea that this is the standard treatment now for relapse refractory of Waldenstrom. The added advantage of the Ibrutinib is that it does penetrate the brain quite well, and in the minority of patients who may have meningeal or CNS involvement, is also known to be highly effective.